She was born into power. A crown waited for her before she could speak. From the outside, her life looked protected, safe, untouchable. But inside royal families, blood was treated like policy. And when that policy failed, it was not kings who paid the price. It was the women born into it. This is not a story about scandal. It is about the cost of royal blood. Princess Alice of Albany. Before this story reaches distant empires and ancient thrones, it begins in a royal household that believed itself ordered, restrained, and proper. One of the women born into that world was Princess Alice of Albany. She entered a family where duty came before comfort and appearances mattered more than explanation. Royal life followed strict rhythms. Days were structured, emotions were controlled. Private struggles were never made public. From the outside, her position appeared secure. She belonged to a lineage that ruled through tradition, where marriage was less a personal choice and more a continuation of blood. For generations, royal families had bound themselves together through close alliances. Cousins married cousins. Relations became spouses. The same names returned again and again. This was not considered dangerous. It was considered responsible. Bloodlines were preserved deliberately. Inheritance was protected carefully. And questioning this practice was unthinkable. But inside these households, unease existed. Children were born weak more often than expected. Some lived briefly. Others survived, but not without difficulty. These patterns were noticed quietly. They were discussed in private chambers. They were never acknowledged openly, because to acknowledge them would be to admit that tradition itself carried a cost. When Alice became a mother, she entered a world where childbirth was watched closely, not with celebration alone, but with expectation. A royal child was never just a child. It was a future ruler, a continuation of the line, a confirmation that the dynasty remained intact. When children struggled, attention turned to the mother, not with accusation, with observation. Her conduct was measured, her restraint was praised, her silence was required. Royal women were taught early that suffering must be borne quietly. Illness was described as misfortune. Loss was described as fate, never as consequence. Alice carried a hereditary condition within her bloodline, one that affected her sons more than her daughters. She did not choose it. She did not understand it fully, and she was never allowed to name it publicly. Yet the burden of it followed her. Each pregnancy carried uncertainty. Each birth carried scrutiny. And when grief arrived, it was absorbed privately. Royal blood was meant to guarantee strength. Instead, it brought fear, carefully hidden, carefully managed, and quietly endured by the women who carried it. Mariana of Spain. What surrounded Princess Alice was not unusual. It was part of a system that had already been perfected elsewhere. One of the clearest examples was Mariana of Spain. She was born into the Spanish branch of the Habsburg dynasty, a family known for guarding its bloodline with extreme care. Marriage in this world was not guided by affection. It was guided by calculation. Mariana was given in marriage to a close relative, not because it was exceptional, but because it was expected. Such unions were described as prudent. They kept lands united. They kept titles secure. They kept power within familiar hands. This practice had continued for generations, tightening the circle each time it repeated. Royal blood was treated like property. It was inherited, exchanged, and protected. And women were the vessels through which that protection passed. Once married, Mariana's role was clear. She was to produce heirs, not eventually, not when ready, but as a duty to the dynasty. Pregnancy followed pregnancy. Recovery was brief. Expectation was constant. Her body became part of state order. Each birth was examined not for her well-being, but for what it promised the future. A strong child meant stability. A weak one meant concern. When children struggled to survive, the response was not public grief. It was quiet evaluation. Questions were never asked aloud, but they were present all the same. Was the blood too narrow? Had the line been pressed too far? Such doubts could not be spoken openly. To do so would undermine the very foundation of rule. And so responsibility drifted downward, not to fathers, not to dynasties, but to mothers. Maria Anna's health weakened under repeated childbirth. Her strength diminished, yet her value remained tied to her ability to continue. Rest was temporary. Care was secondary. What mattered was succession. Royal women learned to endure this without protest. They learned that obedience was praised as virtue. Silence was mistaken for loyalty. If a child lived, the system was affirmed. If a child died, the loss was absorbed quietly. The pattern continued. Blood was preserved. Power was protected. And the cost was carried by women whose suffering was never recorded as consequence, only as duty fulfilled. Mariana of Austria. By the time Mariana of Austria entered the royal world, the pattern was no longer subtle. It was entrenched. She was born into the same family she would later marry into. Her bloodline did not travel outward. It folded inward. When she was joined in marriage to the King of Spain, she did not leave the dynasty. She was absorbed deeper into it. Such unions were justified as necessary. They preserved inheritance. They prevented division. They kept power untouched by outsiders. What was rarely acknowledged was how narrow the circle had become. Mariana's role was defined immediately. She was to secure the future of the dynasty, not through counsel, not through rule, but through childbirth. The court watched closely. Each pregnancy was treated as a moment of anticipation, each birth as a test. Many of her children did not survive. Their lives ended quietly, their names fading from record almost as soon as they appeared. Grief was permitted only briefly. Duty returned quickly. When a son finally lived, relief spread through the court. But it did not last. The child was frail. His body struggled. His development was slow. As he grew, the signs became impossible to ignore. He suffered in ways that could not be explained away as chance. He required constant care. He carried the visible weight of generations folded too tightly together. And yet, the system did not pause. It did not reflect. Instead, it searched for a place to set the blame. Attention turned quietly but persistently toward Mariana. Not openly, not cruelly, but steadily. Whispers circulated through chambers and corridors. Her lineage was discussed. Her influence questioned. Her role as mother became inseparable from the child's condition. The dynasty's failure was not described as structural. It was described as unfortunate. And misfortune in royal courts always settled on women. Mariana continued to rule as regent, to maintain order, to protect the authority of her son. But her position was fragile. She governed under suspicion. She mothered under scrutiny. Her loyalty to the dynasty never wavered, even as that dynasty quietly allowed her to carry the weight of its decline. The court did not condemn the practice of close marriage. It did not admit that blood preserved too carefully could weaken. Instead, it preserved appearances. The dynasty remained blameless. The system remained unquestioned. And the cost settled fully, finally, on Mariana. She had done exactly what was demanded of her. She had married as instructed. She had borne children as required. She had protected the line as long as she could. When the line began to collapse, history did not indict the dynasty. It indicted her. Cleopatra II. Long before European dynasties refined these practices, other royal houses had already given them meaning. In the Kingdom of Egypt, power did not only claim authority, it claimed divinity. One of the women born into that world was Cleopatra II. She belonged to the Ptolemaic dynasty, a ruling house that treated royal blood as something holy. Marriage within the family was not hidden. It was celebrated. Brother and sister were joined together, not as scandal, but as tradition. Such unions were believed to preserve divine legitimacy. They kept the throne within sacred blood. They reassured subjects that rulers were chosen by order, not chance. Cleopatra II was married to her brother, as custom required. Later, she was married again to another brother. These were not personal decisions. They were acts of state. Her body became a symbol of continuity. Her womb became proof of legitimacy. Pregnancy was political. Children were not simply heirs. They were living arguments for rule. But power built this way was unstable. The same blood that was meant to unite also intensified rivalry. Succession disputes followed quickly. Brothers turned against one another. Alliances fractured inside the family itself. Cleopatra II lived through cycles of authority and exile. She was elevated, removed, restored, and threatened. Her children became targets in struggles they did not create. When conflict erupted, the dynasty did not question its customs. It doubled down on them. Blood remained sacred. Marriage remained policy. And the cost continued to fall on the women bound to those beliefs. Cleopatra II was expected to endure all of this without resistance. Her marriages legitimized rule. Her sons justified war. Her presence calmed unrest or intensified it. And through every reversal of fortune, her value remained tied to lineage, not to choice, not to safety, but to blood. In this world, belief replaced doubt. When blood is declared sacred, it cannot be questioned. And when it cannot be questioned, those who suffer under it are expected to remain silent. Cleopatra II survived power struggles that destroyed others. But survival did not mean freedom. She lived within a system that praised devotion while consuming those who embodied it. When belief becomes law, it no longer needs force. It only needs obedience. Cleopatra Selene II. Not every woman born into royal bloodlines showed visible signs of harm. Some survived intact, some lived long lives, and yet the cost was still there. One of those women was Cleopatra Selene II. She was born into one of the most powerful dynasties the ancient world had known. Her lineage connected her to rulers who shaped empires. From birth, her blood carried value, but it also carried expectation. Her childhood ended early. Power struggles consumed her family. Her parents were removed violently from the world she was born into. She survived, not because she was protected, but because she was useful. Cleopatra Selene was taken far from her homeland, raised under watch, educated carefully. Her identity was shaped to serve a future role. She was not asked who she wished to become. Her lineage decided that for her. When she came of age, her marriage was arranged with precision. She was joined to a ruler chosen not for companionship, but for balance. Her blood stabilized a foreign throne. Her name legitimized rule. Through her, order was restored. On the surface, her life appeared successful. She ruled. She bore children. She fulfilled every expectation placed upon her. But fulfillment was not freedom. Every decision surrounding her life had been made long before she could speak. Where she would live, who she would marry, what her children would represent. Her body survived the system that shaped her. Her choices did not. And that is what makes her story essential. Not all damage leaves visible marks. Not all costs appear as illness or weakness. Some costs are quieter. They erase alternatives. They remove possibility. They replace identity with function. Cleopatra Selene lived as a queen, but she lived inside boundaries drawn by blood. Her value was never questioned. Her agency was. And when history recorded her life, it praised her stability. It did not ask what was taken to achieve it. Across dynasties and centuries, royal blood was treated as destiny. Marriage became policy. Birth became obligation. Women became the carriers of consequence. When these systems failed, they did not collapse. They endured, and the cost was absorbed quietly by those born into them. Royal blood promised protection, but for many women, it demanded everything in return.